So welcome again to a new episode of the KewCast. I'm John. I'm joined again by my good friend Eddie. How are things going, Eddie?
Going great, John. Feels like it's been a while.
It has, yeah. I mean, technically we're recording in the week after our last podcast, but this is Sunday, and this will be released the week after, so we skipped a week.
Okay.
We skipped a week.
It's been a while.
But yeah, you weren't feeling it. Your foot was hurting, and the show can't go on without you, Eddie.
I offered, but you refused.
I'm not gonna. I don't want you to.
I had a sub with a really good duper too. Ready to jump in.
Yeah, well, we got a good show today. So I did a little segment with Connor Garnett. He's interested in doing kind of a pro recap. So we're testing the waters there to see if that might be a regular part of the show, a little segment. But regardless, we've got that recorded, so that'll be a part. We've got some paddles of the week. We're going to look at the new PaddleTeks and some gear gossip and gear of the week. So we're looking at bags this week.
Yeah.
Some of our favorite bags. Finally, deep dive. We're looking at some x-rays. I found some kind of important stuff on the new PaddleTeks.
People are loving the x-rays, John.
They're loving the x-rays. I am too. I'll just sit there and look at them for 30 minutes and just like, oh, I've got to start working. And then a little update on the hand speed index and some Q&A.
Let's jump in.
All right. How about we do talk about our title sponsor today?
Centerline Athletics. Mm-hmm. Man, I made a mistake the other day. I played, was outside. My centerline wasn't clean, so I wore just some off-brand, and I was just sweating like crazy. I couldn't get rid. I mean, it was so hot out. Mm-hmm. It's been a hot week in Colorado, like 80s, almost 90. Mm-hmm. Indian summer is with us. But man, I missed my centerline. Yeah. The more I wear that high-tech centerline shirt, the more I realize, I've been wearing cotton shirts, which you can get away with kind of in Colorado with the dry temperatures, but go down to where it's humid and it's not fun. But these things perform well. Well, not just cotton shirts, but those free shirts that you get at tournaments. They're kind of sold as performance wear. They're not performance wear at all. They probably even worse than cotton because they don't breathe whatsoever.
Yeah, but they do have some innovative tech in their clothes, good performance, made by athletes for athletes. So I'm digging it. Yeah.
And you've got a discount code as well, don't you?
20%, isn't it?
On.
Yeah.
John Kew.
All right, well, let's move into, with the magic of previous recordings, we're going to move into the next segment with Connor Garnett. All right, well, I am honored to have a guest on this week's show. Hopefully, he'll be coming back for a regular pro recap. So Connor Garnett, welcome to the KewCast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to be on. Glad we can make this work.
If you don't know Connor, which you probably do, but ranked number 3 in the world in men's singles. Man, I remember meeting you face-to-face for the first time over a year ago in Phoenix at the PPA event there. You taught a little clinic at the end of the day on a PPA tour, and you were kind of just getting started then, and a lot of buzz around you, and the buzz was justified because you've worked your way up to number 3. That was quick. The point of this segment is to do a pro recap. We've done that before. Eddie, my co-host, and I sometimes we'll dive into a little bit of what's going on in the pro scene, but no better than a pro themselves to help us out here and get a perspective on your perspective on what the pro tour is like. So first of all, I just wanted to kind of ask, what is it like to be a touring pro? You are presumably traveling almost every week to different places. Do you have a home base? Are you just kind of always on the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting, the pro life. Everyone does it a little bit differently. Luckily for me, I don't have, I guess lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Not having a family makes the traveling a heck of a lot easier. Obviously, that's the ultimate goal. At some point, I'm probably a couple steps away from that, but that allows me to really live out of my suitcase and travel around and get to explore. I'll try and explore around some of these cities when I'm there. And so I don't really have a home base right now. I was living in Orange County. Now I am just kind of living out of my suitcase. I'll spend a couple days extra at places to teach a camp, to train, and just really fortunate to be able to kind of hit that at the right time of my life where I'm able to just go and travel the country a lot of the kind of that older generation of pickleball players with the families, it makes it a lot tougher. They're flying back and forth a lot more. So there's, a lot of travel involved with pickle, but it's a ton of fun for me.
Well, we on this podcast, we're very kind of gear focused. That's our niche. So would you mind kind of giving, I know you're a Pro XR Pro. You've got your own signature paddle there with Pro XR. Talk a bit about that. Maybe the modifications you make on your paddle in terms of weighting.
Yeah, so right now I've been playing with my signature paddle. Pro XR is super innovative, so they're working on a few different designs. I'm coming out with a signature paddle a little bit later down the road here, and so playing around with the power and spin. Pro XR is known for its spin, which is amazing. I really am able to get the ball to dip well on my shots, and so especially in singles, those passing shots with the Pro XR are awesome, and the speed ups in doubles, really keeping it low so it's unattackable. I would say the mods that I do, I put some weight on the top of the paddle and in the handle to get that bad boy up over 9 ounces. Now, that was coming from a paddle that doesn't have as much pop as the new one that I will be coming out with. So I'll probably take a little bit weight off of that. But really how I look at the paddle mods is how I can get the maximum power with still a good amount of spin. Because spin and power are the two variables that everyone's talking about. You look at all the paddles, those are the two kind of tests that are focused on when people are paddle testing. And so it's how do you maximize both of those? And that's the ultimate goal with any paddle.
Gotcha. That's interesting that you put weight on the top of the paddle and in the handle. So you take the stock grip off, wrap some, do you use tungsten tape?
Yeah, so I'll use lead on the top because it's heavier. And I put more weight on the top, and then I use tungsten in the handle just because I don't really want my hand touching lead or like sweating or any of that stuff. So that's what I'll do. I'll leave the stock grip on. I'll just put it over the stock grip and then put the tape on top of it.
Oh, really? Okay. Do you put it down below, like at the very bottom of the handle, or just straight the way through the handle?
Just kind of straight the way through. I know Slice has their like butt caps. Like I think as long as you get some weight in the handle, I personally just found that the two like pieces of tape work, but there's a lot of different ways to kind of get that going and have the extra weight to kind of make the paddle a little bit sturdier.
Right. You mentioned Slice. Do you use a Slice cap?
I do not. Okay. I was just thinking of like other ways to weight a paddle.
Yeah. Yeah. And shout out to Pickleball Effect tungsten tape. I think that's what you're using. I was in Dallas when Braden was chatting with you and gave you some of his product. I don't know if you're still using that particular brand. Is it Pickleball Effect?
No, great stuff. Like they've been awesome giving me some tungsten tape, and I'll sometimes just get some on Amazon, just kind of whatever works to get a little bit of weight on the paddle.
Right on. Well, that's always cool knowing what a pro uses in terms of perimeter weighting, because it does make a huge difference in terms of the paddle's performance and hand speed and plow through and forgiveness and all that. So good stuff. Anything you're currently working on, Connor, in terms of your game, shot selection, techniques, mental game, anything like that?
Yeah, I think there's always stuff to work on in pickleball. If I wasn't working on things, my ranking would just slowly go away with how the game's going and how competitive it is. You got to constantly be looking at ways to evolve. So I'm really leaning into the mental side is huge. I think just getting back into sports and fully diving in on the competing side and managing those side things, whether it's hopping on a video pod or doing camps, it's how do you maximize the on-court stuff and still do a little bit on the side. So that's been a huge focus. And then on the court, I'm working on the backhand flick a little bit. I like to give J-Dub a little bit of guff and tell him about my backhand flick. Obviously, he's got one of the best in the game, if not the best. And so watching a lot of film on those guys. And I had one in our last men's match, a nice little flick winner. So it's slow progress, but we're getting there.
Well, excellent. Connor, let's move into kind of the recap of this week's tour. So I think you told me you're in Utah right now. You just got back from Virginia Beach. Is that right?
Yeah. Virginia Beach. I made quarters of singles and men's dubs Hunter's been playing really well. He beat me in 3 games in the quarters of singles. He's been playing well. I was up in the second, but he had a nice comeback. He just beat Fed today. So, I mean, on a tear, second final in a row. His passing shots are some of the craziest in the game. And so it'll be interesting to see that final with him and Ben. I think it'll be very interesting. 2 very different matchups, with Ben being very methodical and Hunter with that power game, kind of taking those passing shots. And then moving on to doubles a little bit, Hayden and Fed were the ones who beat us, playing extremely well. I haven't looked at the doubles draws yet today on that, so not too sure on that. And then singles for women's, Kate Fahey made another pretty nice run, lost to Anna Lee today. But yeah, you're starting to see a lot of new players kind of enter the mix, and especially on the women's side, I think last year in singles, women's, it was pretty set. And so it's cool to see some of these new names and some new teams across the board in the doubles categories as well.
You know, what's it like to play Fed and Hayden? Something I noticed watching live when I was at San Clemente earlier this year and saw, the pro tour there. And it's a little different seeing it, in real life versus on TV. It's faster overall. But Hayden in particular, his game looked so different to me when I was watching it courtside. And it just seemed so crafty and everything was like, it was almost nerve-wracking because he kind of holds his paddle till the last second. You don't know if he's speeding up or just dinking. I don't know how you handle it on the other side of the court. So it'd be awesome to get your perspective on what's it like to play Fed and Hayden.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first started pickleball, Hayden was one of the guys I was playing with, both starting out in OC. So have had a lot of hands battles, had a lot of fun battles with him across the years. And for sure, super aggressive dinking and footwork at the net. That's what I'm really impressed with him. And Fed is so steady, and you have to earn every point. Fed's not going to give you anything. And if you leave it up for him, he's going to look to attack, and he's got his patterns really well dialed. So it's kind of this combination of this very steady and strategic player of Fed who's just very calculated, looking for that millimeter. And you have Hayden who can kind of create from all these different angles. And so it's, you know what you're getting with Fed, but you're not going to get a lot of opportunity. Where Hayden, you never know what you're going to get, whether he's going to speed up. And so you're always on alert with him. And it kind of makes a good pairing of 2 different game styles that when they're blended together, they work really well.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Hayden's very much the wild card, and Fed's the rock in that combination. But yeah, interesting to get your perspective on that. Thank you.
Yeah, and Hayden's hands at the net, just one thing that I was impressed with was his closing speed from the midcourt to the kitchen line. I hadn't seen that. We hadn't played in a little bit, but I hadn't seen that kind of closing speed before. So, I mean, he's definitely adding a lot to his game lately as well, too, which is cool to see.
When you say closing speed, do you mean his ability to get from the midcourt to the kitchen?
Yeah, if he takes a high one out of the air, he's moving into that next ball so quickly that you have to be so ready for that next ball. And if you're kind of a little bit slow on that, he's coming at you and you're in trouble.
Right on. Well, I'm sure you're watching other matches in between your own matches. Did you have a favorite one that you've seen on this tournament yet?
Yeah, I mean, it was that Viv David, Dylan Frazier, Jesse Tardio match. That was a battle. There were a lot of great points. I think it went 12-10 in the third. That was just crazy. That was a heck of a match, and Tardio and Jesse were able to come away with that, but really good pickleball and a new partnership of Dylan and Viv. So cool to see a few different partnerships coming out of this tournament.
Yeah, I have not seen that yet. So I'll definitely tune in for that. That wasn't quarterfinals, was it?
It was round of 16, maybe. Yeah, I think round of 16.
Yeah, and I love the matchup of Jesse and Gabe. That's such a fun duo to watch.
Yeah, had a ton of success recently, feeling confident. They look good against Ben and Anna Lee there, weren't able to get it. But yeah, definitely shaping up to be one of the top mixed teams for sure.
Well, cool. Any predictions on this since the tournament hasn't closed yet? Do you think Anna Lee is going to triple crown? What are your predictions for final Sunday?
I mean, you look on paper and that's definitely happened a lot this year. So I'm just excited to see some good pickleball tomorrow. It's going to be pretty interesting. Venue, the courts are a little bit like, they're not as grainy as like when they're painted over the blue. So it's a bit smoother, not as smooth as Bristol by any means. So it'll just be interesting to see if that changes anything with who comes out on top and how that affects the overall play of the game tomorrow. So I'm excited to watch a little bit of pickleball.
Yep. Fantastic. Me too. Connor, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Hope we can do this regularly. And do you have any shout outs or socials you want to promote?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. On Instagram, Connor Garnett. My website, connorgarnett.com, has kind of everything from my camps to virtual coaching to my newsletter that keeps you up to date on just what's going on the tour. And it also has my merch, Tui Nation. My backhand Tui is kind of what I'm known for. So we have some hats there. And it's been cool to see really the progress that's made. Even at Virginia Beach, there were some people that were rocking the Tui Nation hat. So it's just awesome to have that community. That's one of the things I love so much about pickleball, is just that community and everyone's engaged and you just meet so many awesome people. So that's kind of my long-winded shout out, and just thanks for being a part of the pickleball community. So thanks for having me on this. And yeah, hopefully we can make something else happen with this. But yeah.
Awesome, Connor. Thanks so much again. Have a great weekend, man.
Yeah, sweet. Talk to you later.
Well, that was a great segment.
That was a great segment.
Really interesting.
Let's move on. Before we move on, so Connor and I recorded that yesterday.
How did you connect with him?
Through Brett Mack of the PPA. He is one of their top guys, and he knows our podcast, loves our podcast, and obviously he knows Connor, and Connor had been talking about, apparently, his interest in kind of doing something similar. So he connected us. So thank you, Brett, for
But you've
making
met
that connection.
Connor at, what was it, San Clemente?
I met him a few times, yeah.
Okay.
Originally last year when he just kind of joined the Pro Tour. I was in Phoenix at the PPA back in like February, I want to say, of last year. And he did a clinic. I took the clinic after the the day of tournaments. I met him also in Dallas. He was there. He was in the back room when we went to visit the Pro Pickleball,
right.
Pro Labs. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit. Braden gave him his tungsten tape, which he's still using. And anyway, good guy, really, really nice guy, and well-spoken. That was fun. All right, let's jump in. Oh, yeah, I also wanted to mention, we recorded it yesterday, and this was before Final Sunday, obviously, so we're kind of talking about what happened in the tournament up to then, but in this latest PPA, pretty big Final Sunday, so I didn't get to see it, but I saw the scores, and I saw that Fed and Hayden took out the Johns brothers in the gold medal match.
That is something.
Nice.
It
went to 5 games, I saw.
We'll have to catch that one on
pretty
PTV.
Brutal. Yeah, and Connor and I was just talking. They got put out. Connor and his men's partner, I forget who he was playing with. They got put out by Fed and Hayden. He said they were just playing lights out. A really good combination, those two.
I like to see this parity in pickleball.
It is nice, yeah. Besides Anna Lee, she's still completely dominant. She's got a chip on her shoulder now, too. She's just like, you want to take my medals? Not a chance. Yeah, she's got the eye of the tiger, man. Her mental game is just so fierce.
There's some up-and-comers.
Yeah, I think the gap is closing.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. That's all I wanted to talk about. Anything else for you in terms of news?
Move on. Battles of the week.
Yeah, we're moving straight
It's been a
along.
fun week, man.
So I did the review this week of the new PaddleTek ESQ. I talked a little bit about the new ALW-C in that review, but it was focused entirely on the ESQ. And if you don't know, it's the ESQ is their new one they just put out with a long 5.5-inch handle, standard shape. And it's kind of like an ALW with a slightly longer handle.
The differences are so minuscule.
Yeah.
I've hit them, and if I was blindfolded, I'd have a hard time.
It would be hard, yeah. I wouldn't be able to hit the ball blindfolded, but I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them for sure.
Good point.
But there's ESQ-C is a true standard shape, so it's at exactly 8 inches wide. ALW-C is 7.9 inches wide. So really subtle, but subtle differences in shape can make a difference. And the ALW-C has a 5.25 inch handle. ESQ-C has a 5.5 inch handle. I loved the ESQ-C. Like, I gave it a really good review.
You should.
I can't put that paddle down. And between the two, we have a 12.3. Is it 12.7 or 12.3? I can't remember. But the thinner of the two, it was my favorite. I think it's 12.7.
12.7 and 14.3.
And 14.3 is their thicker one. That's a little more control oriented. So, you've got everything from all court leaning power to all power in the 12.7. That one was interesting to me too. Normally, thinner paddles, they get better pop but less power. So from the baseline, you really have to swing them hard to generate the power. That was not the case for me for the 12.7.
Nope.
And either the ALW or the ESQ. Like, that thing pops. And you swing with full swings, you're getting as much power as an elongated power paddle.
Would you call this a full-on power paddle?
I would call, yeah, absolutely, for the 12.7. I think both of them are power, and the 14.3 is power leaning into all court. Yeah. Yeah, the sweet spots are good, especially for a Gen 1 paddle without edge foam. And we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in terms of the interior perimeter weighting from the X-rays. But sweet spots are good. I wouldn't say they're as good as some of the better Gen 2s with edge foam. I can tell a little bit of a difference.
But the swing weight is so low on these.
Very low.
So there's so much capacity to add weight to push out that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Which is something the other paddles, the Yolas, don't really have.
Yeah. We'll get into the questions, Q&A in a little bit, but comparing this to the Ripple, I think, is a good comparison because the Ripple also starts really light. Mm-hmm. And you can just add a lot of weight. So.
I don't know if that's a trend or just a coincidence in the latest two paddles being sort of very maneuverable, but I like it.
Yeah, that's a weird combination too. Normally, the lighter paddles don't have the power. They can be very poppy, but they don't generate the power, and these certainly do.
Yeah, so this paddle is a lot of fun.
Hey, you've been hitting with it. What are your thoughts on it?
I've pretty much hit, outside of testing, in gameplay with the 12.7 ESQ. It's fantastic. Mm-hmm. I've got it weighted differently than I've weighted any other paddle at this point. Yeah, but it's really working out well for me. And we can talk about that now, or we can talk about that later. Where is that paddle? No, it's at home.
Okay.
But the way I have it set up is 3 here.
3 grams.
3 here.
Toward the top of the edge? Okay.
Top here. There's a little bit of weight already kind of embedded in the paddle in the midsection here, so I went a little higher than that.
Okay.
And I've got 3 grams at the top.
Okay.
I don't normally do that, but there's a bit of a dead spot on the top of this paddle, and it really helped in that regard.
Yeah, that's where I'm saying the sweet spot feels a little bit smaller than Gen 2s for me, because if you hit it toward the top, it's going to...
Yeah, there's a very convenient line that they put here indicating where the power ends.
That's true. And on a standard shape paddle, you're only getting 16 inches of length, so you've really got to focus on bringing on hitting the ball a little lower on this paddle. But once I got used to it, adjusting to a lower sweet spot, I think it's fantastic. But it's interesting that you have 6 grams on the neck, and an additional 6 grams near the top of the edges, and then 3 grams on top. Yep. That's a lot of weight, but it's probably still, 116 swing weight or something?
Oh, not even close.
Oh, really?
It's probably around 110.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I play it, so what I'm playing with is 3 grams, really standard for me. I put 3 grams on each side at 4 and 8 o'clock. And I haven't even measured the swing weight, super light in the hands. And every time I get adjusted to a heavier paddle, my main has been the Chorus Shapeshifter now for 4 months. And that one starts pretty heavy, comparably. Mm-hmm. And I added some weight. I think it's like a 118 swing weight. And I get used to that. There's perks to that for sure. And when I go back down to a really light weight paddle, I'm just like, I love the hand speed I get with this. So I didn't want to start with too much weight, but immediately I put on these 6 grams of weight on the edges, which helps broaden that sweet spot and not raise the balance point too much. But then I started messing around. I added another 3 grams on top of these, and I didn't like it. I did it just felt, I didn't give it much of a chance. I played a full game with it, and I was just like, part of my love of this paddle is the maneuverability. Then I moved those 3 grams down here, just below, put them on the neck. I still didn't like that. It just felt too heavy. I didn't try anything on the top, but I'm just like, I went back to this. This is what I'm used to right now. I may eventually add more weight because there's certainly room for adding weight here. But right now I'm loving where this is. And I've been playing with this. I find it hard to put down. So I've been testing other paddles. And every time I'm with another paddle, I'm just like, oh, the ESQ. It's just that extra pop and spin. It's got a good combination of
Not
everything.
much not to like, right? I mean, dimensionally, I think it's for me, my preference with a slightly longer handle, big wide face.
Yeah.
That low swing weight just, again, gives you so much room to mess around with.
Yeah, for sure.
Really adding weight to not just help with the sweet spot, but just overall feel and control, I think, is increased by that extra weight.
What did you do with the handle? They come pretty thick. The handle's stock.
Yeah, I took the grip right off. I've been doing like 2 layers of hockey tape, which is very thin, just to build it up a little bit. And then the Yonex Super Grip. Nice, firm grip.
Yeah, I did the same. I took the stock grip off and put one Bodie overgrip on it, and I wrapped it, pretty... I put a lot of overlap on the wrap. Do you know what I mean? Instead of
build it up a little bit.
To build it up a little bit. And I like it. If you can feel the bevels. One issue that I had with the stock grip is with the stock grip, it's a little squishy, makes it thick, and the top and bottom of the handle, this part, is pretty wide and flat, and that makes the bevels of the octagon pretty narrow. So this is a big improvement over their previous versions of PaddleTek, which is like an ovular handle. But I just like being able to feel those bevels a little better. So taking the stock grip off, putting a single overgrip on, did the ticket for me. But I did notice when I took the stock grip off, and I knew this about PaddleTeks before, they put what do you call these things? I always forget what their names are. The little inserts they put on the top and bottom of the core to create that octagon. They're wooden.
Right.
They shave them out of wood.
Right.
Which
seems very low tech.
It seems a little low tech, but then I'm like, wood is a pretty good option. It's lightweight and it's durable.
It's firm.
Yeah, and at least it's like handcrafted, I don't know if they're shaving it with a knife or whatever, but it's driving me crazy what those things called. I'm going to have to look it up and memorize it. Anyway, I had some questions about whether or not a slice cap would be good in this. For me personally, no. It's a really low balance point to begin with. Lightweight paddle, so adding some weight somewhere is going to be good. But I would recommend adding it above your hand at first to kind of shore up the sweet spot. I do want to try one on top, Eddie. Since you mentioned that, that's intriguing me because there is a bit of a dead spot up top for the lack of foam. And as we'll see with the X-rays, there is internal weighting on this, which I think broadens the sweet spot even further. Which with a standard shape paddle that's 8 inches wide, it's already got a pretty wide sweet spot. But I think that internal weighting brings it close to the width of the sweet spot of a Gen 2 with foam. But up here, there's nothing, and it's just kind of dead a little bit.
With the weight on, I'm getting a twist weight of 7.5 plus.
Nice.
So that's
a good twist weight.
A lot of forgiveness there.
Yeah.
What do you think? Did you notice that they deleted their handle nub? I don't know what they call it.
Yeah, thank God. The nipple on the handle. That thing is horrendous. It looks ugly.
I was trying to keep it clean when you went there.
And it's a pain in the butt for paddle reviewers because I like to put I like to put them on the turntable and let them spin, and you got to get like putty to hold up there. Anyway, lots of good improvements. I don't know what they're doing, how they're sourcing their polypropylene core to make it so powerful, or what they're doing to the core. But my God, it's in terms of power, it is right there with the Yola 3S paddles, just below the most powerful paddles on the market. That being the Ripple, the Gearbox Pro Powers, and the Mod TA15, and the delisted original Yola Gen 3s.
Any downsides, negatives that you're seeing?
And besides that spot at the top and a
Yep.
slightly smaller sweet spot overall, I can't think of any negatives. I mean, I'm loving this thing. I played with it in a mini tournament today. We didn't do the greatest, but I played well with it, and I didn't want to.
Hey, I'm not part of this weep, by the way.
That's right.
I played great.
Did you? Nice. You're on the mend, and you're kicking butt. No, it was me and Yu Shen. We played like a little local duper thing.
Nice.
Did not do well, but it wasn't because of the paddle. And yeah, I mean, the spin is fantastic on it. Whatever they're doing with their peel ply, American sourced raw materials, is pretty incredible. Like these got, one of them averaged 2,400 RPM, which is like tip top of the peel ply categories. And that's about all I want to say. I want to compare a little bit with the ALW. You know, you're right. It's only a very subtle difference. I do enjoy the extra 1/4 inch on the handle. I notice it. You know, something about a 5.25 inch handle is just a little bit below what I need. I can play with a hybrid shape paddle with a 5.3 inch handle, and often the necks taper up more gently on the hybrid shape paddles, like my Chorus shapeshifter, so I'm able to get my hand up further above the handle. So something about going to a standard shape with a 5.25 inch handle, I'm just like, you know, I really got to overlap my hands to get 2 hands on there. This 5.5 inch handle clears that right up. There's no problem getting a 2E. You also get more leverage with the extra 1/2 an inch on the handle, and my results with this and my comparisons side by side are that on the 12.7, I'm getting more power with the ESQ than I am with the ALW. With the 14.3, I feel like I can't tell any difference. I don't think there is much of a difference between the ESQ and ALW. But I'd also say that the ALW sweet spot felt slightly smaller to me also. I think it's just that 0.1 of an inch being more narrow. I think overall, the ESQ is a more forgiving paddle slightly. Again, we're talking very subtle differences here. And the extra handle length, I very much enjoy. So I prefer the ESQ over the ALW.
Boy, you look at what this thing's made out of, and you don't really expect all the pieces to come together like they do. But, man, there's some, I don't know, some ghost in the machine there.
Right. And there's a couple, there's great grit on the peel ply. There's 2 layers of unidirectional carbon fiber pre-preg, and then a 3rd layer of that. It's fiberglass, basically. They call it something high tech, but it's a layer of fiberglass underneath. So the fiberglass is giving an extra pop when the ball digs down that deep. And something about that core, man. Their cores are unlike any others. They are larger cell cores, which they're 10 millimeter cell cores, which is bigger than the standard 8 millimeter diameter cells. And typically the larger cell cores, they play more muted, softer, more control-oriented, less powerful, but not these. The ball comes off hot.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more when we get into the X-rays later on, but that core is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I had not seen this black and white colorway until just now.
It's nice, right?
So I may have to steal that one from you for a little bit.
Yeah.
I love that.
And if you're a little more control-oriented player and you do like power, then I would recommend the 14.3 thickness, the thicker of the two.
You struggling with control at all in the 12.7? Because
a little bit, yeah. I mean, when I'm a little tight and I'm working my way through the transition zone, I'll tend to pop balls up more than I would with my 14.3 or other more control-oriented paddles. But you're not?
Nope.
Okay, yeah.
Nope.
I would say that for this level of power, the control is pretty good.
I'd say even a little bit easier to control the 12.7 than the Ripple.
Where my Ripple is at now, yeah.
Oh, okay, well.
Yeah, my Ripple is still breaking in, and it's definitely at gearbox levels now.
Okay.
Gearbox level power. I pulled that out today after the tournament. We played another game, and it was just like, hello. I'm getting some wicked power with this. Yeah, good times. So great job, PaddleTek, with the new release. They did raise the prices a bit. It is a little bit harder to recommend a Gen 1 paddle for $250, but the performance is there, so it shouldn't be just an issue of, they don't have edge foam. I mean, there's a little bit of of smaller sweet spot because of the lack of edge foam, but otherwise it's comparing with the top paddles on the market in terms of power and control.
It's irrelevant. I mean, you can work around the lack of edge foam with your own weighting system.
Yep,
Set up the way you like it. So
that's true.
If you're paying for performance and not for technology, then this is where I would put my money.
Yeah. Good stuff. And they're not likely to break. Far less likely to break than any kind of thermoform.
And from what I gather, they've got a great warranty. So I've never had to use it, but
I've heard exceptional things about their customer service. Like they treat their customers like they would their pros, And lifetime limited warranty.
Do they have pros? I can't think of one.
Must be low tier pros.
Yeah. The B group.
All right. Yeah, we've got some gear of the week this week. We haven't talked about bags in a hot minute. And we've got a lot of bags over the past few months. Like we've been very fortunate to have the best bag companies sending us their bags. And we've got some of our own bags from the past that we still enjoy playing with. So.
Yeah. You're kind of a bag geek, aren't you?
I'm not. I was about to say you're much more into bags than I am. A bag is a very utilitarian thing for me. I do love a good bag. I think you and I talked about this. Maybe that's where you got the bag geek thing. But I do love having a good quality bag for work. In my archaeology job, I have this leather satchel kind of thing, and I can fit my laptop in there, but it's pretty sleek, and I'm willing to pay good money for something that's not going to break, and it's good quality stuff. My pickleball bag is, I'm a little more utilitarian with that. I'm just like, I need this and this and this for functional reasons, but I appreciate the better things on bags also. But we got a few to talk about. Anyone you want to start with?
One of my old standbys is just this carbon sling bag. It's been out for probably a year or even more at this point. But when I just need something small water bottle and one or two paddles, this is just so low profile and easy to get around. And this was a gift somebody gave me, but it's held up so well, and it's all you need for a couple hours on the court.
This one, it's a very lesser known of the carbon bags. The one I know of carbon is that massive touring bag.
Right.
Where you can fit 100 paddles in there.
Right.
And that's one I see a lot of people using, which seems to be a good bag. I haven't tested it yet. But this, it's just got one strap. It's like
throw it over your shoulder.
Yeah. You can fit, a couple paddles.
2 paddles comfortably, couple of balls and a water bottle.
Any special...
And your wallet and phone, and you're golden.
Any special features, pockets that you love, or is it just...
It's just the size of it, and
it's got the sleeves inside too.
Yep,
Oh, I do like also that it's silver on the inside.
It's a thermal sleeve,
black.
so if you're in a hot climate, you're not going to bake your paddles.
Okay, so there's one side silver, the rest is kind of a dark gray, which might be hard to see. Your stuff kind of turns into a black hole. But yeah, it's got an internal mesh pocket, another internal pocket on top of that. I mean, pretty standard stuff for pickleball bags, but it does feel quality. The zippers seem good quality.
I think we all started with that kind of triangular bag. Do you remember those?
These, right?
No. Just like the sling bags. They're these triangular things that they've been out for probably 15 years. But for something small, this is a go-to. And I've come to really appreciate, the fence clip.
Yes, that's pretty key. Yeah,
love it. All right, Carbon. Thank you.
Yep. What next?
ADV.
Yeah, let's go ADV.
This was a Kickstarter bag.
Yep.
You want to talk about the background of it a little bit?
Sure. So it was a joint venture between ADV, the bag maker, and Pickleball Will Chang. And he they brought the knowledge of creating good quality bags and that background, and Will brought let's adapt this to pickleball. And they gave him kind of free reign on ideas, and they adopted a lot of his ideas, and they're making now a couple. I have the original. They sent me that one, which is black, and you have 2 versions. I didn't even know they had this second version that you've been letting me borrow for the past few days. But do you want to talk about their original one?
Yeah, I mean, this is the one I think most people know best is their tour bag, I think is what they call it. And love the color, this heather gray color, this kind of textured.
I prefer that over the black one for sure.
So nice. And the fact that the inside is all kind of this very bright. I think there's a couple, maybe 3 color options. I chose this Volt Yellow.
Yeah.
But everything in here pops. I mean, you're not losing anything in here because of this this color scheme. It's got this kind of clamshell design, which I would say for a day on the court is not the best.
I agree.
Because, I mean, you're going to put this on the ground and you have to open it like that, which to get to your stuff, which is not very feasible for most pickleball court setups.
Yeah. I mean, you can hang it on the fence, in an open position, I think, right?
Yeah, you could.
But I struggle with that a lot. And short of like putting it on your hotel bag, like a suitcase, and opening it that way, it's pretty clunky to open it like a book. It just doesn't work.
Yeah,
really.
It works great in a hotel room, I would say, for a weekender bag, something like that. You just want to throw a few things in for pickleball. It's okay for that purpose.
Yeah.
But you and I are going to the court every day. This is not the bag to take.
No. It does, however, carry a crap load of stuff. I mean, you can put
You aren't kidding.
12 paddles in there, no problem. It's not just that compartment, but you can also put it on. There's a pouch on the very outside you can slide one into.
Yep, there's a cooler compartment here. Access from both sides. There's just a ton of organization.
And there's so many like hidden pockets. I think I still haven't figured out exactly how many pockets there are in this. I keep finding new ones. And there's I think on the top pouch there's a hole you can stick your charging cable cord through to stick your charging port in another pocket. It's just really lots of detail.
And these straps are adjustable. They're kind of hooked on, but there's 3 different slots for the strap hook.
Yeah.
It's a great, the quality-wise, it's a fantastic bag.
It's top-notch. Like the zippers aren't going to break. You can look at the stitching on the handles. There's no way that top handle is going to come off like a lot of other bags suffer with.
Yeah.
The straps themselves they use for the handles are really top quality, like almost like a parachute style strap. Just like super top quality materials overall. I would trust.
Like a seatbelt almost.
Yeah, kind of like a seatbelt. You could probably hang 100 pounds off that thing and it'd still hold up. The zippers aren't going to break, and overall top quality stuff. I would say, of all the bags, we could talk about a million bags because there's several good options out there in various price ranges. But the top 2 for me are going to be this ADV bag and the kitchen bag. Yeah. And for people who want a big tour bag, top quality big tour bag, I would say the ADV is your choice. For people that want a sleeker bag, don't want to carry on a massive backpack, I would say the kitchen bag is a better option.
I just noticed that this big tour bag has, you're right, these clips on both sides. So you're right. Yeah. If you open it up, you can hang it on a fence. But again, that's awkward. It's a huge amount of real estate.
It's a huge amount. You could literally put your kitchen in that bag. You pull out a stove.
Yep.
But that one, you've been letting me borrow a different one, which I didn't even really know about. I think I saw something about it. But this one, I enjoyed it. It's a little more compact than the tour bag.
This, when they launched the tour bag on Kickstarter, they threw in this backpack as an add-on. I think it was only $150 or something at the time through Kickstarter. This has become my favorite bag. If I was going to buy something from ADV, this is the bag I would buy for going to the court every day. If you're carrying water and maybe 3 or 4 paddles, I love this bag. It's set up completely different than the other one, though. The main pocket here is this cool design here, so you can get into it from the top. And if there's something buried at the bottom, the whole thing opens up.
Nice.
Which is incredibly functional. Huge amounts of organization.
So you're not going to lose stuff in the bottom of that bag.
Gosh.
Right. That's the problem with almost every bag, right? And the way it opens up so wide, you're able to get into the bottom of the bag.
Yeah, and even with this thing full, you can still access your balls here on the side with no problem. There's plenty of room. There's an AirTag pocket right here, a hidden AirTag pocket. I've been tracking you the last 3 days, John.
That's what I see on my phone. I was like, who's got the AirTag on me and where is it? Okay. And handles everywhere.
Oh, my goodness,
And you got the little straps on the side for add-on stuff, like those 3
I actually put my keys here.
Yep.
And then this is actually your paddle pocket in the back here. And there's sleeves for 3 paddles here.
Yep. I do love it. I've grown to love the sleeves that they include for paddles because it allows me to take paddles without the cases and the neoprene covers for the paddles. Because with like the original like tennis style bags, you want to hand me this Vallejo one.
Yeah.
I mean,
This is kind of classic.
Yeah, this is a classic bag, and it's a good bag too. And I think it's like $100. And if you have a budget of $100 and you want a bigger bag, you can get this or comparable ones. But you know, you can fit a bunch of paddles, a bunch of gear in here.
What I don't love about these tour style bags is they don't sit up on their own.
They don't sit up on their own. They kind of slump over.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, there's no paddle sleeves, so you can stick a bunch in here, but they're clinging together. And I've often pulled paddles out that have been sitting next to other paddles, and they have scratches on the. It screws up the peel ply. Not a good thing on your new paddle. So I would recommend using the neoprene sleeves on the inside of these, but that then limits the number of paddles you can get into it. But this is a solid bag. I do like this is kind of a rubberized texture that they put on this
very
little bag.
water.
Yeah.
Resistant.
Yeah, water resistant, and the bright blue color is nice. I think they make a pink one too.
But Carbon has a bag like that.
Yeah.
I think probably most manufacturers do at this point.
How much is the Carbon tour bag? I think it's more expensive than.
I don't have the price on that one.
I think it may be close to 200 or so.
It might be. And this ADV backpack is, I think, 220, 230 now.
And the original one's 300.
I believe so.
Okay.
That's right.
And that brings us to the kitchen bag. And of the bags I've used, this is by far my favorite. And I did not think it was going to be my favorite because, you know me, I love bringing lots of paddles with me wherever I go. And this is a slimmer profile, you know. It's a smaller bag in general. And you can't fit that many paddles in it. It does have sleeves for
5, I think.
5 in total, and that's about the max you're ever going to. I'd like to have 4, and no more than 4 in here, because when you put that 5th paddle in, it squeezes the internal compartment so tight you can't really get in there anymore. True. And it restricts your access to the ball hoppers on the side. But it doesn't have the clamshell design. You know, it opens up pretty wide from the top too, and it's got the interior is nice and bright. They've collaborated with Bread and Butter on a bag with Bread and Butter designs on the interior, or you can get them direct from the kitchen website. But I mean, it's just such a top quality bag, and the design looks great. It's aesthetically pleasing. Of all the bags I've ever used, this is by far the most comfortable sitting on my back. One of the reasons is it's low profile, so it's not sticking out. I mean, there are add-ons. You can add the shoe cube if you want. I don't carry my shoes around in my bag with me. I just don't like doing that. If I'll carry them around in a separate bag or just by themselves, and I don't really switch out my shoes too much. So that's not an issue with me. But the low profile keeps it closer to your back, so you don't feel like the backpack is tugging you backwards all the time. And just the way the straps are and the padding on the back, just a really ergonomic design. Feels great. Everything's top quality, zippers, straps, everything. They've got magnets on the pockets here. So the one issue, these are ball pockets on the side, which is really cool. I guess there are 2 issues. One is if you put too many pedals in here, it's hard to get into the ball pockets. Secondly, the whole thing is pretty much waterproof. It's water resistant. But if there's a downpour, that's the one area where the water can get into, because it opens up this way and it's not watertight. So if it's raining, the water's going to seep into the ball pocket hole. One thing I love about the pack is the roughened rubber bottom of it. It's a stiff bottom, and it sits up on its own. When you put it on the ground, it's not going to tip over. It's not going to slump over. It's a rigid design, and this is entirely waterproof on the bottom. And it actually, do you remember the torrential downpour we had at the Dallas PPA?
Yeah, I remember that.
I was sitting having lunch under a tent, and I'm just like, all right, I'm going to wait this thunderstorm out. And I put my bag on the ground, and I'm kind of looking around at one point, eating my lunch, and the entire sidewalk was just like a river. Like a 1-inch layer of water is flowing over the sidewalk. Like the water table had been reached, and it just started. And I picked up my bag, and I was like, crap. And then I looked, and this rubber had protected the water from seeping into the bag. So everything in the interior was very dry. So that actually was an instance where that really, I was able to test that, and it worked out perfectly. But yeah, it's smaller. I would not necessarily recommend this as a tour bag. It's a great daily driver, but I am using this as a tour bag. I have to supplement it with other bags. And one issue, which kind of throws off my perception of bags, is that I'm also using my bags as camera bags and tripod bags. Not many people are doing that. You know, a lot of people use an iPhone and a little tiny little tripod, but I'm carrying around like extra batteries for my cameras, and I often put my tripods in my pickleball bag. But I use this only for pickleball. I have another bag that I'll carry around with my tripods and cameras and that sort of thing. But I'm able to do it with this. It's not the biggest bag, and you're not going to be able to fit in like 3 solid meals, a bunch of snacks, and 5 paddles, and your extra clothes and everything else. You gotta plan to go light, or bring a supplementary bag. But this is my favorite with supplementary bags, even on tours.
I would say the quality on that bag is just outrageous.
Yeah,
it's so good, and it's. Everything just works the way it's supposed to work. I would agree with you. It's a little tight. It's a cramped bag for if you like to carry a lot of stuff, and I do. Mm-hmm. For me, 3 to 4 paddles is normal. Mm-hmm. An extra shirt, towel, 3 balls, that kind of thing. And with that, it starts to get to feeling a little bit like I would like to have a little bit more room.
I will say that this is much preferable for a carry-on bag than bigger bags. I think these will fit as carry-ons, even the tour bag.
Well, I'm going to figure that out tomorrow.
Okay. But they're gigantic, and good luck getting that thing under your seat when it's packed full of paddles and everything. This, it does have a laptop sleeve in the interior. So, and it separates that from the paddle sleeves. So I can carry 3 paddles, a laptop, my gear, plenty of my gear in here, take this on a plane, my headphones and everything, and use this as my carry-on the plane, together with one other carry-on, and I'm just fine. But this slides right under the seat in front of you. You don't have to stick it.
Have you had any trouble with the size of the water bottle holders?
No, they close through magnets, but they open up, and there's stretchy things on the side that allow them to open up. But I use the big Nalgene style water bottles, and they fit. You can fit 2 in there just fine. Yeah,
I would say all great bags. Frankly, it's a matter of what you want to take to the court. If you're a 1 paddle person, I would say carbon. If you're a 3 paddle person, 2 or 3 paddle person, the caddy's a great option, and then anything more, and the ADV is the way to go.
Or how much you're willing to spend on a bag. A lot of people don't want to spend more than $100 or $200 on a bag, and this one's $300 also, the kitchen bag. I think it's well worth it in terms of the craftsmanship and the excellent materials that go into it and the design. But I can also recognize that people don't want to spend that much. Some people don't want to spend that much money on a bag. And there are cheaper options that serve the same purpose. So
I see plenty of people carrying around the free string bags you get from tournaments.
That's true.
And that's fine.
Yeah, that's true. But if you are willing to spend $300 on a bag, I would say the 2 options out there, the 2 best options are the ADV and the kitchen bag. And you can pick and choose between those options based on how much you want to carry and things like, how comfortable is it? How heavy is it? Does it fit your needs?
I don't know, John. I feel like if you're playing pickleball every day, practically like we are, and carrying upwards of $1,000 in gear, may as well travel in style.
That's right. Yep, and these are some good bags. All right,
cool.
Let's move on to deep dive.
Right on.
So I've been loving the paddle X-rays. I've been getting good feedback from people, and shout out to, what is the name of this place? I Get It Chiropractic in Westminster, Colorado here. They are a chiropractic clinic who Tony Spinuzzi, a friend of ours, connected me with them. He goes to them, and they are charging a nominal fee for me to go in and X-ray paddles, which is awesome, because most of the other people I asked to X-ray paddles looked at me like I had a third eye. And we've got it down to science now. Like I go in there, and Samantha takes me to the X-ray room. I put the paddle, I tape them on the wall back there, and get the X-ray, set up where it should be. I run back behind the wall. She presses the button. I give her the paddle. She writes the name on it, and we can get like 10 done in under an hour, probably 30 minutes or less. right? And so I've done, I think, 40 paddles, 30 to 40 so far, right? But I didn't have a chance to get in there before my ESQ review. But now I have the PaddleTek ALW and ESQ paddles x-rayed. And a lot of questions showed up in my review as to what exactly is this internal weighting system, and does it differ between the paddle variances? So the 12.7 versus the 14.3. And if you look at their website and their advertisement, it's some kind of like weird, like they have a weird name for it, like carbon steel weighting, perimeter weighting, something like that. And it shows like a strip of something on the side. And I remember from like Chris Olson's breakdown of the previous PaddleTeks, the previous ALWs, that there was like looked like a fishing weight on the inside of the paddle, right?
Yeah.
He actually dissected it, and some of them started rattling, and then they apparently like fixed it or altered that so that, you know, the ball would stop rattling, and that's where that steel.
So they're
carbon
calling
design.
it the carbon steel twist weight and balance system.
Okay.
And it looks like in the picture, it's kind of a bar.
A strip, yeah.
A strip.
It almost looks like, you know, your typical lead weight, 3-gram strip on the inside of the paddle. But I forget the paddle reviewer's name. Apologies, but he did leave a comment on my ESQ review and said, hey, you know, I reviewed this also and pulled the edge guard off of one and saw just putty I stuck putty in the cells. He's like, but I just did it on the 14.3. I don't know about the 12.7. So here we are. So
Well, that doesn't sound like carbon steel.
It does not sound like carbon steel. It doesn't look like carbon steel either. So if we look at the paddle x-rays, okay, so I've got the ALW-C 12.7. Are you looking at that one, Eddie?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a thinner of the ALWs, and you can see clearly there is a combination of putty and a metal ball inside the edge guard.
Is that your own lead tape at the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's this paddle you just saw. Those are 3-gram strips of lead tape that you can see in the X-ray. So you can see the polypropylene core. There's no edge foam. You can see the edge guard. You can see my lead tape. And you can see some putty stuck in at 9 and 3, and then a little deeper than the putty is a perfectly round ball. I don't know if it's probably steel, you know, and maybe the putty is like a weighted carbon putty. That's why they're calling it carbon steel carbon, whatever the terminology is. But here we are with the 12.7 having a combination of putty and steel balls. If we scroll down and look at just the 14.3, the steel balls are gone, but the putty remains. So we've got the same amount of putty, presumably 1 gram on each side at about 9 and 3. It was interesting to see that it's a little bit offset too. Like it's not very standardized. First of all, both of these are higher than where they placed them on the 12.7, and then one of these is higher than the other on the 14.3. Also, you noticed this too, and I noticed this right away. Looking at the cells on these, they're a little bit deformed, which is unlike the previous PaddleTeks that I've seen, the Bantam. So I looked at the Bantam, I forget which version. Prior to this, I had it x-rayed, and the cells are like picture perfect, perfectly circular for the most part. There's no crushing or anything. There's no crushing on these either, but it almost looks like there's what's the force I was just mentioning earlier? Like the force that goes this way, opposite each other. So it's like they're bent a little bit one direction on one row and then opposite direction on the other row. Almost like they compress the core from the sides of the paddle instead of like the Yola cores, which are pressed, you know, on the top and bottom of the face. I don't know if they're compressing the cores, probably not, but it could have just come off the manufacturing line from the people they get the polypropylene from this way, or maybe there is some pressure applied to the core. It's not the same kind of pressure that a Gen 2 paddle has with a mold. They're not applying heat and pressure. This is like a cold pressed sandwich paddle, but I don't know what to think of these cells. They're just a little bit wonky.
It's very strange. The cell walls are very well defined. They're just sort of ovular in shape, a lot of them. In fact, I would say more of them are kind of have this fish egg look to them than they are like perfectly circular or hexagonal. So
yeah,
it's It is very interesting. And it even seems even more, if you can use the word deformed, but more irregular at the top of the paddle where you and I are kind of sensing that dead spot. So
That's true.
something to keep an eye on.
That's true. That's the trend I've noticed with all my X-rays, especially on the Gen 2 paddles with edge foam. The top of the paddle just looks like a mess. Like it all looks crushed up. And I don't know what it is about that point of the paddle that causes so much deformity in the cells, but it's even apparent on a non-thermoformed paddle here. All right, and then we've got so it's the same on both the ESQ and the ALW models. The 12.7 thinner paddle has the putty together with the steel balls, and the thicker 14.3 model only has the putty. So I'm assuming that there are 2 grams of weight on the thicker one and probably 2 to 3 grams of weight, or I'd say 4 to 6 grams of weight total on the thinner models. And that kind of jives with what I'm feeling with the paddles. Like the 14.3 feels a little bit more forgiving, but I would expect if everything was equal, comparing apples to apples, going down to such a thin paddle, I would have much less forgiveness, and it wouldn't hit as hard from the baseline. But with that extra perimeter weighting they're putting in the thinner ones with the steel balls, I feel like that's providing a more forgiving paddle, widening the sweet spot, and adding a little bit more power. Even though they're still super lightweight overall.
Right.
Smart move from PaddleTek. And this is one of our predictions. Remember a few weeks ago, Eddie, we were talking about 2025 predictions. Not only, this fulfills 2 of our predictions. I'm going to toot our horn for a second here. But we've got the internal weighting system, which it's not entirely new, but it's still fairly untapped, I'd say, for most paddles. Don't think a lot about how to manipulate weight before the paddle hits the market on the interior of the paddle. And then second prediction was that eventually the standard shape paddles would reach parity in terms of power with elongated paddles. And you get the perks of the standard shape paddles in terms of the wider sweet spot, better hand speed, more maneuverable, but they don't have as much leverage as the longer paddles. So typically they've not been as powerful. What boy, these things are. These are top tier power paddles, and they're standard shape.
I don't know if you remember, John, but way early on in this podcast, maybe one of the first 2 or 3 episodes in January, early February, we actually talked about manufacturers potentially doing a lead-infused or a tungsten-infused foam or a putty just like this as a way to kind of push that weight out to the perimeter of the paddle. And
right.
We're seeing that. I think we're just going to keep seeing this.
Yeah.
And maybe not in a concentrated way like this, but in a more spread out, uniform way.
Yeah, sure. I feel like I think YOLO was the first to introduce the edge foam in their Hyperion model, and that was not entirely thermoformed. It was just foam squirted into the edge of the polypropylene, and it wasn't encased in a carbon fiber tube like the modern Gen 2 paddles are. But I feel like everybody's kind of copied that, and yes, it adds a lot of performance perks to a paddle, broadens that sweet spot, takes out some of the vibrations. Yeah. But I feel like that's, people should move beyond just that foam, and in particular that type of foam, the rigid expanding foam with that yellow stuff that kind of crunches when you stick your finger into it. And I think there's a lot better options out there in terms of perimeter weighting to reduce vibrations and broaden the sweet spot than that particular type of foam. It could be other types of foam. Could be steel balls, right. Putty, whatever, or the way it's placed in the edges too is going to impact the performance of the paddle. I think that is a wide open area of innovation that it's kind of lagging behind. Like it surprises me that it's taken more than a year now for paddle companies to think about doing something besides edge foam.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not a lot of density there with that foam either. So it's
no.
It's not doing much in terms of weight as it is potentially for forgiveness.
Right.
Looking at this X-ray of the 14.3 ESQ, it seems like the core on this one seems to be more uniform, more regular than the others. Are you seeing that as well?
Totally. I was going to mention that. Thank you for bringing it up. I forgot. Compared to all 3 of the other X-rays, the 14.3 ESQ it looks like your typical PaddleTek core, which leads me to believe that it was an unintentional thing on the other 3 paddles, not necessarily something like they're intentionally compressing the core from the edges of the paddle. And maybe it was just, a different batch of the polypropylene that happened to be.
Have you noticed any difference in gameplay with these 4 paddles?
It's funny. So that
could be tied to this.
Maybe. Now that I'm thinking about it, I did the pop and power tests for these, and they're very, very much all similar. The most powerful of the bunch, just by a little bit, was the ESQ 12.7. I'm looking at firepower, so it's combined power and pop average together, the percentiles. That one got the highest. I think it was like a 93, which puts it up pretty close to like the Gen 3s. And then the ALW 12.7 was the next highest at like 90, I want to say, maybe 91. And then the two 14.3s were lower, like in the high 80s. But if I could have this wrong, I'll put some notes on if I do. But what I remember the results being is that the ALW 14.3 had a little bit better higher firepower than the ESQ, which surprised me because it was the reverse for the 12.7s. And you would expect the ESQ with the longer handle to have more leverage and get a little bit more power, but it didn't turn out that way. So maybe what we're seeing here is that the cores...
That is really interesting.
Yeah, the cores that look slightly wonky might be producing more power in the same way that, or a similar way that the compressed cores in Gen 2 paddles are more powerful. I don't know.
Might be onto something there.
I wouldn't say, that's just a little piece of evidence. I wouldn't say that's conclusive by any means.
Nope.
And I also wouldn't say that these are at risk of breaking. One thing I've noticed is looking in detail at the crushed cores in Gen 2 paddles is the lines separating the cells in the honeycomb are much less defined. You can see that these cells are very well defined, even the ones that are oblong and not circular.
Yep.
And that is a sign of a healthy cell. And the crushed cells, the cells can be crushed in probably multiple ways, but the 2 ways I'm seeing in the x-rays are the ones I've identified in my 3S review where they're star-shaped and the walls are caving in on themselves, So instead of being circular or octagonal, they're star-shaped because they have concave walls because all the other cells are pushing them inwards. Right. And they also crush like an accordion. That's easy to see when you cut a paddle open and you look at it in profile. You can see that the cells are, the cell walls are not vertical. They're scrunched up like an accordion, particularly on one of the other faces. And that shows up in an X-ray as just kind of a fuzzy-looking cell wall. Not necessarily concave or straight or whatever, but it's just kind of fuzzy looking.
Not very well defined.
Not very well defined, and it's not bright white like these are. So there's no indication in the x-rays that they're being crushed inwards, which would lead to a more fragile core and eventually the core breaking. These are just kind of either pushed from the edges of the paddle or just they came that way from the factory. I'm saying I don't think it's going out of a limb to say that these are going to be much more durable, even the ones with the misshapen cells, than a Gen 2 paddle that's been crushed.
And on this last x-ray, they appear to be of your molar. You might want to check that out.
Okay.
So you got a little
They put my tooth in the sides of the paddle for perimeter weighting. All
John's
right.
tooth for scale.
All right. Any more? You want to talk about the x-rays?
No, let's move on.
Let's go to another update on the hand speed index.
Let's go.
I'm with you. I'm just like, oh God, yet another update. So I took the hand speed index that I had off of my paddle database, and a few people saw that and asked me why. Well, it's being adjusted again from Brian Fitzpatrick, who created the formula, the math behind all of this, and again. The hand speed index. The hand speed index is how many watts it takes to flip a paddle with various movements. So wristy movement, an elbow dominant movement, and a shoulder dominant movement. Well, what he found in consultation with somebody else who looked at his blog post and then contacted him, and this other person's coming from a background dealing with swords. Swords have balance points also. And he used a paper, the author's name is Turner, but it's based on sword dynamics and where putting weight on the sword can affect its performance and its swing weight and that sort of thing. And something about Brian's formula that's been adjusted a couple times, but something about the angular power requirement in the formula, he wanted to change it based on this new paper he read, based on sword dynamics. And after he changed it, it changed some things around a little bit. And it no longer shows that adding weight to the base of the handle below the fulcrum can reduce I want to get this right. So it's no longer possible to reduce the overall power requirement by adding weight to the end of the handle. So the linear power requirement still decreases. So that linear power is where the paddle ends up in a straight line from one point to the other after that 180-degree flip. But the angular power is that angular motion, right? So it's that arc motion. So it's no longer possible to reduce the overall power requirement by adding weight to the end of the handle. The linear power requirement still decreases with the with the weight at the base of the handle, but the angular power now increases. So it offsets that. So what that all means in layman's terms is this idea that adding a slice cap to a handle, the base of the handle, is going to reduce the watts required to swing a paddle 180 degrees is not true. It feels like it's true, and what you're feeling is a reduction in the linear requirement, that straight line between A and B, but it's offset by the angular requirement. Still, there's perks to the slice cap and to adding tungsten to the base of the handle or whatever. And those perks are it feels more maneuverable in your hand. So there's a perception there. That's, most people feel that. And there's some perks to adding weight anywhere on the paddle. There's increased plow through, there's increased power and pop. That's all subtle, and it also lowers the balance point, obviously. And that alone gives some perks in terms of what feels like hand speed. Anyway, that's a lot of math in there, but it doesn't really affect the performance of the paddle other than you can't reduce the wattage required to flip the paddle 180 degrees by adding weight anywhere on the paddle. Similar to swing weight, right? It's a similar concept. Like, can you reduce the swing weight by adding weight below the fulcrum? No, you can't. At best, it's going to stay the same. Mm-hmm. Same with the actual force required to move.
So
a
where
paddle.
are we with the hand speed index? What's the future of it?
I'll probably still have it on there because it's going to be useful. And it's still useful to consider balance point. The lower the balance point is, the more maneuverable a paddle is going to be. That's the way it is. Mm-hmm. But it's just not as extreme as what we thought with the prior version of this formula. I think I'm going to take out like the wrist dominant, elbow dominant, shoulder dominant indices and just put in the hand speed score that I had before.
With the fixed ratios.
The fixed ratios, yeah. And, I think that's a good approximation. And there are other people who are creating their own formulas for this, not as physics-based. They're not calculating watts or anything like that, but they're using things like swing weight, twist weight, balance point, and kind of configuring those. That was my original idea too, and I had something also to that effect. And I reached out to Brian, and he was like, well, let's get this dialed in more. I'm glad we went that route. But there's a high correlation between what Brian's formula is showing and these other derived formulas based on just swing weight, twist weight, and other things. So, for example, Justin with Pickleball Pursuit created one, and we compared ours together with Brian's formula versus his and my hand speed score. Really tight correlation in terms of what the top and the bottom pedals are and everything in between. So Lewis is using that on Pickleball Pursuit, and it's a very valid formula as well. My goal is just to make sure all of our formulas, we're all kind of talking in the same language, and people are gathering kind of a general idea that yes, you can control, you can have an effect on a paddle's maneuverability based on where you put the perimeter weighting and how that affects the balance point. But you're never going to be able to add weight to a paddle and reduce its power requirements to move it around.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because in my world, that theorem holds true for swing weight. You just can't put weight anywhere and reduce swing weight.
Right.
Similar to this, you can't do anything with the overall power requirement for hand speed.
Right.
So
Good
makes
stuff.
logical sense. Just got to figure out the details.
Yeah, got to iron it out.
Right.
All right, let's move on to Kew A.
So Jeff Gonzalez, I think this is from your last video?
Yes, this was the ESQ review.
Okay. How does the ESQ compare to the Ripple and the Scorpeus 3S?
Good question. All three are standard shape paddles. right? So 16 inches long, 8 inches wide. Come in various thicknesses. So the ESQ and the ALW come in the super thin 12.7, the 14.3 thicker one. Ripple comes in 14 millimeter, and he was asking specifically about the Colin John Scorpeus, which is 16 millimeter. There's also the Anna Bright 14 millimeter. So all very comparable in terms of shape, raw materials. For the surface, the Ripple is very different in terms of the guts of it. Anyhow, good question, because they're all power paddles. So we've hit with all of these. I can tell you, from before I talk about my perception on the court, from my power pop testing alone, the ALW-C and the ESQ-C power output, the firepower, is almost exactly the same as the Yola 3S Scorpeus, 16 millimeter and 14 millimeter. The 12.7 ALW-C is a little bit higher than both the Scorpii, the 14 and 16, but they're right there together. And you compare that then to like the Rhombus. Rhombus starts at that same level, but it breaks then and moves up into the Gen 3, Mod TA15, Gearbox Pro Power level, which is where my 14 millimeter Rhombus is now. But how are your impressions, Eddie, in terms of how you feel they play on the court?
Well, they're like you said, they're all power-oriented paddles, and I think if you go into it with that mindset, you're going to be pretty okay with any one of these three, honestly. I feel like I have to be kind of on my game for the Ripple, because it's just it's so powerful that my technique has got to be kind of on point that day.
Right.
When I need a little bit more forgiveness, I'm probably leaning more towards the PaddleTek at this point. To give me a little bit more control, a little bit more. It feels like of the three, that's the one with the most perceived dwell time in terms of paddle to ball interface.
I would say that of the three, the Ripple has the most dwell time to me, but definitely comparing the ESQ and the ALW to the 3S, Yellow 3Ss, they have a lot more dwell time than the PaddleTeks. To me, and the 3Ss are very stiff, especially for a foamy paddle.
Yeah, I'm not loving the feel of the 3S compared to these two.
I would agree.
They feel very hard.
I do like the Colin, and when I'm playing with these paddles on the courts, I'm always gravitating right now to the the ESQ 12.7, the thinner of the two. And when I'm feeling that a little tight or that's a little too much for me, instead of going for the 14.3 ESQ, I pick up the Colin John's 3S, and that feels really good to me. It just feels a little more muted, and controllable. Yes, it's stiffer, but maybe I'm just not giving the 14.3 ESQ enough.
Do you have that
time.
Colin John's here somewhere?
It's in my back.
What I don't love, and I want to verify this, is the handle length. Yeah, see, that's a pretty significant difference right there.
Yeah, but we're also comparing an over-wrapped handle. I wonder what the stock looks like comparatively. The neck on the Colin Johns drops a little lower than the neck on the ESQ. So you're going to get a little bit
Whereas
more.
the Rhombus and the ESQ, I think they're both
very similar.
They're very similar.
All right, so so lots of things to talk about in terms of our perception of the difference, but I would say power, totally comparable between all these paddles. When they first start off new, then the Rhombus jumps ahead after it breaks into the elite power levels. It also suffers from control a little bit more than these others. In terms of feel, I agree with you. Between the ESQ, ALW, the PaddleTeks versus the Yola 3Ss, I just like the more forgiving feel of the PaddleTeks, less stiff feel. I still think I don't care for the Anna Bright 14 millimeter. That was my favorite probably of the two Gen 3s, but when it comes to the 3Ss, they're stiffer. So I'm liking the thicker Colin Johns Scorpeus. I think this is a really good paddle. It's a really good balance for a power paddle between that power and control. And that's the gist of it. So it's stiffer. The 3S is stiffer than the PaddleTeks. PaddleTeks feel a little bit more forgiving. Not quite as big of a sweet spot, however, on the PaddleTeks compared to the 3Ss.
So where are you now in terms of like 1, 2, and 3?
Ooh. I mean, recency bias, but 1 right now for me is ESQ 12.7. 2 is the Rhombus Ripple, and 3 is the Yola Colin John Scorpeus
Exact
3S.
same here.
Okay.
And I don't think it's a recency effect.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I did have fun with the Ripple at the end of the day today, but like I said, I played that tournament, and then we finished the tournament, and we just played a couple of rec games afterwards, and I picked up the Rhombus. I was just swinging freely with it, loose, and it was just like, man, the power, just that little bit of extra power makes such a big difference. And then opponents were commenting, they're like, what paddle is that? Good God, stop it.
I love the Rhombus at the kitchen line, man. People are they're coming at you. Just put it up. It's just a shield. It's not a thing that you need to move. Just put it up, and it's coming back hard and fast.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so much fun.
Well, that was a good question. Thank you to Jeff Gonzalez. We got another one here.
Yeah, from Mr. 3301.
The old 80s band, Mr. Mister.
What was their song?
I forget. I was like, super early 80s. I was in like grade school.
So there were a couple elements to his question or her question. But if it breaks down to this, if a paddle sounds like a shaker, you do one of these and you can hear it. Is that bad? Is that a bad thing? We hear that a lot.
Right. And short answer is no, it's not a bad thing. And typically it's from glue coming loose between the facing materials and the polypropylene and ending up as little specks of glue and epoxy inside the polypropylene cells. And we just saw the x-rays. You can imagine if you had like little hard specks of glue in there and you shake it, it's going to sound like a maraca. Yeah, the second source of that is on like Gen 1.5 paddles with edge foam, but that's not encased in carbon fiber tube. That hard foam can also break off and enter the polypropylene cells and cause a shaking effect. Neither one of those is necessarily bad unless it's a symptom of a bigger problem of the paddle, like delamination, disbonding. Now, disbonding is when all 3 layers of the surface come loose from the core and that glue separates, that holds the facing layers to the core. Now, if that happens and then you hear the shaking as a result of that, that's bad. That means your core is breaking down, your paddle is breaking down. But most of the times, a way to test for the bad things versus the innocuous things that aren't necessarily bad is to do the old press your fingers in the center or all over the paddle. So press pretty hard with your thumbs and try to hear a crunching sound. And if you hear that crunching sound, that's broken core, which relates to either core crushing or disbonding. I don't think I have a core crushed paddle here, but none of these are core crushed.
And then you've got an integrity problem.
You got a problem if it crunches when you press your fingers into it. Otherwise, there's a lot of paddles shake around. There's loose bits inside the paddles. That being said, the paddles with really good warranties will replace those. Selkirk will replace those right away. Gearbox, that happens on some gearboxes even. If the Pro Powers, even though they're completely different layups, sometimes you get some shaking or whatever. They'll send you brand new and send back your old one.
I've done that probably 2 or 3 times. It's never a question asked.
Gearbox?
No, any paddle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think once with a Selkirk, like you said.
Okay. Nice. Another good question.
So for the most part, we're good to go if you hear that rattle.
Yeah. Like I said, unless it's symptomatic of something more sinister with the paddle, but typically it's not. Typically it's just some glue bouncing around in the cells. Yeah, and it could be annoying.
I can't deal with it though.
Okay, yeah. If it annoys you, right, ask it to be replaced, but it's not going to break on you.
All right. I think we're done with Q&A.
Done with Q&A. Done with episode 31.
Whew.
Yeah.
That was a fun one.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And Eddie, I hope your foot is healing up. And
yeah, I'll be in Maryland for the next couple of days.
Yes.
I don't know when this video is coming out, but if anybody knows good pickleball in Rockville, Bethesda, that area, let me know.
Sounds good. Good, sir.
Thanks, John.
Thanks so much, Eddie. See you next time.
Catch you later.